don't focus so strongly on your download numbers now, because you need to get better at what you're doing, and you have to have quality content out there consistently in order for an audience to gravitate towards you. And until you focus on that, you're not going to get any better, or you're not going to see any results.
Welcome to Be Bold Branding, where we discuss the power of differentiating yourself through your own unique story and standout personal brand. Greetings, business stars. As entrepreneurs, you know your business will not grow if you don't market yourself. In other words, you've got to put your brand out there. And one of the most effective ways to do this today is through podcasts. That's why we're talking with Jason Sircone today. He's the founder of Sircone Consulting, where he helps people like you get better at their skill sets so they can promote their brands and establish their authority as a value-driven podcast guest. Today, you're going to learn Jason's personal story and how his brand and story played a part in his success as he shares his journey with us and why he does what he does.
And now we'd like to welcome Jason to Be Bold Branding. Hello, sir. Thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Tanya. It is a pleasure to be here with both of you today.
The pleasure is ours. You are a fellow Steelers fan from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm also a Steelers fan. And I used to consult Froggy Radio up in that area, which my understanding is they're not called Froggy Radio anymore, but that was one of the media accounts that I consulted back in my consulting days. It was a lot of fun.
Pittsburgh's a blast. We have a lot going on here. Yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm pretty sure it's not called Froggy Radio anymore. I believe they changed their name to something else. But if I'm speaking out of turn, I absolutely apologize.
Hey, no worries. Look, either way, they are or were fantastic. And here's the cool thing that a lot of you may have noticed is on The Office, there are Froggy Radio bumper stickers in view on the show The Office.
Yes.
There's Froggy Radio stickers, bumper stickers, like on filing cabinets or something throughout The Office.
Yeah.
So there's a little Office trivia for you guys.
Yeah, and a little bit of Tanya branding history too. So.
That's right. That's right.
that is a tremendous observation too.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's like, hey, wait a minute, stop that. I consulted them. I know that bumper sticker. And our son loves The Office, so I've seen every episode.
Well, since we've gone off script, I'm going off script also. Is this the same people that told you not to listen, told the salespeople don't listen to her? She's just our consultant.
It sort of is, yes. Froggy, I love you guys. But yeah, I was a consultant there for a little while. And as consultants and coaches and so forth in our lives, we have some very interesting stories. And that was one of them. Yep. I came in and I had this whole game plan, and general manager said to one of the guys that I was working with hand in hand, he said, hey, don't do that. Don't listen to her. She's just our consultant.
Takeaway number one,
folks.
If you can't listen to your consultant, don't use that consultant. Like, I don't know.
But it's also proof that it doesn't really matter sometimes how great that brand is. You're just going to run into some crazy stuff that.
That's true.
It's so funny. I don't know how unknown this fact is, but the Big Mac, maybe one of America's most popular sandwiches, was named by a secretary. So why aren't we listening to everybody who might have some value to provide?
Thank you. Absolutely.
I like
well,
you're gonna love this guest, guys.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get on with your story, Jason. All right,
let's do it.
So, was there a specific event in your life or a specific person in your life that shaped who you are today and resulted in what you're doing right now?
I have to give credit to my parents. They were not entrepreneurs. They both had just 40-hour week jobs, but they worked their asses off. They really instilled strong work ethic in me right from the start. And I can't thank them enough for that, because that's what keeps me going. And I still have their wisdom and tutelage to draw from. I still talk to them all the time about business and ultimately how I can get better at what I do. And, I always look at, I feel thankful, to summarize, because I know a lot of people do not grow up with that kind of environment and that kind of leadership and guidance in their life. And I always feel incredibly fortunate to have that type of fallback and that type of support system to to always draw inspiration from, and it motivates me to keep getting better because I want them to be proud of what I do. And ultimately, I'd like to be able to pay them back someday for everything they've done, if that's even possible, which it's probably not, but it's a lofty goal that I am very, very anxious to obtain.
It's a great goal. And you send me
goal.
your mom and dad's email addresses. I'm going to make sure they get this episode.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know they're proud of you. I know they're very proud. So tell us a little bit about Sircone Consulting and like how you came to do what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I have been doing what I do now for the past couple years. I started a craft beer advocacy blog back in 2014 called Breaking Brews. And that morphed into me working with some bars and some restaurants and breweries here in Pittsburgh, ultimately helping them to promote their events and place their products in different bars if it was on the brewery side. And business was going very well. But in the midst of all that, I started podcasting, really fell in love with the medium, wanted to do more with it, and came into 2020 with this mindset, because I do this every year. I analyze the past year, start asking myself some questions to prepare for the next year. And coming into 2020, I had just turned 40 years old. And the question I asked myself was, can you be doing this when you're 65? And I started thinking about the activities that I was doing on a daily basis. And the answer was no. This is going to be really hard to maintain long term. Obviously, I'd like to retire well before then, but that's a story for another day. But I started thinking about what are elements of this business that I'm building that really stand out and can really carry me for the long term. And the one element that stood out was podcasting. I had built my own show. I had developed a skill set with podcasting. I was enjoying it. I was helping others produce their own shows. And I realized that this was probably the better path to take. That was in January. Fast forward to March of 2020. And I'm sure we don't have to have a massive history lesson on what happened then. But when the world changed, thanks to COVID-19, all the bars and all the breweries were shut down. And every one of them basically was going to cut ties with me. And I had to get very creative with how I stayed employed to carry me through that time frame. And I did. And we were able to work out some working arrangements that worked for all of us and continued to get their products out there where we could. But it allowed me at that same time to start looking at how am I going to make this transition? And I'm going to go into podcasting full time. And that was really when I did it. I just said, okay, I'm going to start focusing the content that I produce, direct it right towards podcasting and helping others build their shows. And then that morphed into, what about the guest side of this? Do I want to start helping people get booked on shows? And then I did that. And in doing that, what I learned was people can really learn a lot and gain a lot from being a guest on other podcasts. But there's a system that they should be following and really a method to the madness in order to get the results they need to serve them and their brand. That's where I threw all my attention and said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going all in on helping people understand the power of this platform, ultimately how they can build their brand being a value-driven podcast guest.
I love it. That is right up our alley, Jason, for sure. And man, what a fantastic time. You know, we talk about it a lot of times, you know, you'll hear the numbers now. There's 2 million new podcasts out. You know, 2 years ago, there was, 600,000. Now there's, of course, then those of us who are in that podcasting arena, branding arena, we realize that, there's a fallout rate of like this. I don't know, you probably know the percentage is probably 70%. And then, so it's still such an emerging market, wouldn't you say? It's still such a great opportunity for people.
Oh, gosh, without a question, Michael. I mean, there is so much that we still have not tapped into with the podcast space yet. One of the big things that I keep telling people is don't focus so strongly on your download numbers now, because you need to get better at what you're doing, and you have to have quality content out there consistently in order for an audience to gravitate towards you. And until you focus on that, you're not going to get any better, or you're not going to see any results. And so many people walk away from their podcasts so early because they don't feel like they have enough downloads. They don't have enough people listening.
Right.
And whenever I get someone that asks me that, the first question I ask is, well, what's enough? What's the number that you're looking for? They don't really have an answer for that. I would say 99 times out of 100, no one has had a number that they're striving for. They just think that they need more. Because whatever guru along the way said that the more downloads you get, the more opportunities you get. Yeah, that may work in regards to advertising, but if you're not putting value out there, you never put yourself in a position to get to that point. Because when people tune into a bad podcast, what do? They turn it off because it's not valuable. It's not serving the purpose they want it to. So you have to be thinking on that level at all times. And when you do, you get better at your skill set, because the more and more you're doing this, you develop a voice, you find your voice, and then you can project your message in a confident fashion. And that's going to ring through that microphone and ultimately make people want more from you. You can do that as you host your own show and as you appear as a guest on another show that has an established audience. And that's part of that method to the madness. When you're finding shows that are in your space, you can build your brand by communicating with a new audience every single time you make a guest appearance. It's so powerful and offers so many advantages.
It's hugely powerful. And I do want to say about that, when internet first came along and people were saying, well, we need to get impressions. And it's like, I don't care about impressing 50,000 people. I care about talking to 15 that want to do business with me.
Deal with.
Right. So there's the impact that you want to make to the right people. And that's where we came up with our saying that, you don't just need people to know you exist. You need the right people to know why you exist.
For sure.
And there's a big difference with that.
Now, I like your thought process because we're the same way. You know, it's somebody quantified it. And I was talking about this the other day and I cannot remember who it was.
It was a social media post that showed so many different people in one room. Is that what you're thinking of?
No, it was somebody, well, maybe, but it was somebody that literally said it, but I'll quote them. And then if y'all hear this, you know, shoot me an email and I'll give you the kudos for it. But they said, look, you know, everybody wants to talk about how many likes you got, or how many, like in podcasts, how many downloads you got, or how many people shared your post, or whatever this might be. And they think it needs to be like some kind of hundreds of thousands, and they got to have this. But if those of us who are on the street selling something, you know, like she used to sell vacuum cleaners, I still sell real estate, you know, you went door to door with selling yourself, right, you know, to breweries and stuff like that. So any of us know that if you could get 10 people to just listen to your pitch, would that not be a successful day? That'd be an unbelievably successful day. But for some reason, when we start talking social media and podcasting, we think if we don't put it on there and automatically 1,000 people downloaded it and thought we were a star, that we can't become one. And that's definitely a mindset shift that people have to get a hold of. You know, I would say if I could get 10 people in here that wanted to commit in the next 6 months to buy a house, I'd talk to them all day.
100%. You have to have that mindset coming into it. If you launch a podcast with anything other than that mindset, you're not going to go far. You're going to be one of those episodes or one of those podcasts that fades away because you just don't have the commitment to your project that you need to have. This is how I tell everybody. And it's really along those same lines as what you just laid out, Michael. If you had 50 downloads on your podcast and you're upset about that because that supposedly isn't enough, if those same 50 people showed up in your living room for a party, would you throw a terrible party and not have cocktails and not have drinks and not be social and talk with those people and get to know them and what they like and what's been happening in their world? Or would you look past all those 50 people that took the time to show up, past them out the door to the hundreds of thousands that haven't found you yet? No, you'd be putting all your attention on the people that were in front of you. So you have to start thinking about that with your podcast, because when you focus on those 50 people that have already shown up and said, I love what you're doing, the content you're producing is for me, I'm here for it. The more you keep giving them value, the more those 50 people are going to turn around to a colleague and say, you got to listen to Michael and Tanya's podcast. This is awesome stuff. When those 50 do it, now you got 100 listeners. You just doubled your audience. And then the exponential growth kicks in and you're off to the races.
You're creating 50 soldiers.
Right. Exactly.
You know, it's a way to think about it, to go out and espouse, you know, your beliefs and, you know, talk about what you do and why you do it. Yeah,
exactly right.
So something that struck me that we resonate with as well is, you know, why do most guest pitches and presentations just flat out suck?
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's a lot of lack of preparation. I think that's the biggest problem, is that so many people are just so interested in getting their voice onto as many podcasts as possible that they don't really take time to discover if that podcast is going to serve them. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the past podcasts I did was called Pod Theory. It's still out there. It's basically designed to help podcasters be better at podcasting. So there's tips, strategies. I've done some interviews, and I'm not producing content for it actively, but it's still there and it may get a rebrand in the future. Wink, wink, hint, hint. We'll see. But I had a guy reach out to me and say, this is around the 4th of July last or 2 years ago. 4th of July is a terrible time of year for dogs. They hate fireworks and those loud booms are just catastrophic to their world. I'd like to come on your podcast and talk to your audience all about this. I don't have a podcast that's geared towards pet owners, towards pet care. It's a podcast about podcasts. So why would you be able to provide value for my audience with that message? Why wouldn't you take that message onto a pet care podcast where people tune into it to hear content about pet care? They may not know this. You're going to have a better opportunity to provide impact and value when you do that. But so many people are just throwing cooked spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks,
right,
reaching out to 50 podcasts a day and hoping one responds, that they're not taking time to really put value behind anything they're doing, from their presentation and then ultimately to their correspondence. Yes. So the biggest reason I feel that lack of preparation plays a role is because they're just trying to get as much exposure as possible, as fast as possible, without actually listening to a show to see if there's valuable content that resonates with them and also exists in their world, to where I could reach out and say, you know, Mr. Podcast Host, I just listened to episode 53 of your show about X, Y, and Z. It was phenomenal stuff. I love that conversation. In fact, I work with clients in this same space. I've shared this episode with 3 or 4 of them already, and they loved it too. Right off the bat, with that correspondence, I'm providing value and showing the host that I actually listened and their content resonated with. Gives them a reason to say, maybe they have some value they can bring on the show and talk about as well. Because, you know, as podcasters, you're looking for people that can come on the show, tell a good story, be entertaining, be compelling, but ultimately serve the audience with value. So the audience keeps coming back for more every week.
Agreed.
And that's really where the presentations fall short.
Yeah.
Makes so much sense. Yeah. It's not just hey, I'm good at podcasts, pick me.
So many people do that. They share this list of accolades that they've attained over the course of their career, or they think that because they're a 7-figure earner, or they've helped people be a 7-figure earner, they have value to provide. That's fine. You may have value to provide, but tell me why. Don't just let that list of accolades be the driver where I have to look at it and say, well, okay, well, what kind of value are you bringing to my show? What are we going to talk about? I'm happy for you. And anybody that's obtained that type of success, congratulations. That's fantastic. And you've earned the right to brag, but it doesn't tell me why you're going to serve my audience.
And that, yes.
That's so true.
That's so true.
And that's the other place that most people go wrong, is not just not being prepared by not knowing, you know, the type of podcast they're going on and the type of content they're seeking, but they also don't have their own story dialed in. They cannot articulate the why. And that's the personal branding side. It's like,
that's
how do you present yourself to the world, right?
100%.
And present yourself to other people in a manner in which they see great value.
Exactly. And I got to tie this together a little bit with what we do, because we teach people all the time this, it's okay to, like you said, if you've achieved these things and you have these accolades for you, that is good. But people don't usually choose you because of that. Like they choose you because of you. They choose you. They don't choose a logo. We teach that in our book, and Tony's been teaching me that for 8 years and taught that for many years before that. People do business with a person, and what are we attracted to as people? We're attracted to the why. We're attracted to the story. We want to know what's made Jason Sircone do the things that he's done to be successful as a podcaster. And now what does he do? Those things are what is really valuable to make that connection with people. Not just I've done X amount, or I've sold X amount, or something like that. We have it on our website, on my website. My success in the real estate business, especially during REO days, is very important, only to say, in fact, we say it on our website, why is this important to you, the customer, right? Because it's not because of me bragging on how much I've done. It has to do with that experience level being valuable to you. And that's where you got to get across to people. The story behind why you do the things you do is so valuable, so valuable.
I could not agree more. And if you go look at the About section on my website, where I tell my story of my professional path, I tell that story because it's the authentic truth. This is what I've gone through. This is what got me to where I'm at. And then I break down each section. Who is this for? What does it do? Why will it be valuable for you? If you don't think that it's valuable for you, then click the X button and move on. That's totally fine. I don't want to work with someone that it's not going to work for.
Right.
And that's where, I look at like that list of accolades. What comes after the list? Yeah, you've done all these things, but what's going to happen next?
What's next?
Exactly. If you can tell that, that's when you tell your story. And that's what's going to get people intrigued and looking for more value from you.
Agreed. I was going to ask you specifically if there was one piece of advice that you would give people about how to present themselves to someone to get a connection. But now I can just, because you've already given us a great takeaway. What else would you add? Anything else to that with people when you, other than clearly work with Jason to be better at it? So that would be one takeaway for sure. But what else would you tell people about being valuable as a guest to help grow your own podcast?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that you are providing value from the start, and it's not just about the interview. You've got to look at every facet of this relationship that you're building, because if you do, there is so much value that you can get from it that goes beyond the interview. If you do things right, you can monetize your interview before it goes live. If you do things right, you could potentially land yourself 3 or 4 other guest appearances without lifting a finger. If you do things right, you can communicate with that audience again before the interview goes live. It's going to help them understand who you are, what you do, and how you can provide value to their world. When the interview comes along, that's icing on the cake. But you're building a relationship with these podcast hosts to the point where you can take things to new levels just by having the interview. Michael and Tanya, you can tell everybody the conversation you and I had before the three of us had before we even hit the record button was great, because we spent time getting to know each other. We learned some commonalities, we love the Steelers. Michael, I'm not sure if you mentioned that you're a Steelers fan or not, but if you're not, we'll let you off the hook.
Listen, here's the way I split my sports like this. I'm not watching anything on TV. I'll go to anything live. That's pretty much the way
and we're not near the Steelers.
But hey, in absence of being a fan of any football team, I think Steelers are insane awesome. How about that?
That sounds great. But the point is, we spent time getting to know each other. And if I'm a betting man, which I am, I guarantee when we end this conversation that everyone's hearing, we'll have some more conversation and more things to talk about. And that's really where the value comes in, because you get to build and nurture a relationship right off the bat. But if you're coming into a podcast interview thinking that it's a transaction and you had no communication with that podcast host leading into it, and you just come in and start selling, and you spend the entire interview in sales mode and you turn it into an infomercial, there's no value that's going to come of that. In a lot of cases, podcasters will just throw that interview away and will never see the light of day.
Never show it. That's right.
So you have to be thinking about being a valuable asset to this podcast production and the overall ecosystem that it exists in. If you do that, there's much more value to be gained from you and much more value that you can provide. And at the end of the day, it's people helping people, humans helping humans, and we're all going to grow together. And we're all going to make an impact on the world based on the message that we're putting out there. But if you don't come into it with the right attitude, you cost yourself a lot of opportunities.
That's awesome advice.
That is fantastic advice. Yeah. And one thing we've learned about the podcast world, Jason, is that everybody is so helpful. It's a giving.
We love it.
Community, very giving, and people want to see each other succeed. And I just love that.
And they're there to help for that. I mean, we've really enjoyed that. Our friend Alex Sanfilippo, he said it's like everybody from the podcast world approaches it from a place of abundance, where so many other industries. I'm in the real estate business and have been for 30 years. I mean, it is not that way. You cannot. My crew does, but for the most part, you cannot get people to understand that there's plenty of business out here for everybody. I don't care how many people get a real estate license tomorrow. I'll still be selling houses, right? But there's plenty of work, right? But it's very hard in most industries. Podcasters don't feel that way. And every podcaster we work with, have on our show, talk to, is just, how can I help you? What can I do for you?
Right.
Is there anything else I can do for you? And we get it constant. We love it. Love the whole community.
That's the mindset you got to have, because that translates to so much beyond podcasting as well.
It does.
And it ultimately becomes a philosophy that can carry you through life. If you're constantly thinking about how you can be there for others and serve others, everything else is going to take care of itself in the end. But so many people get hung up on being cutthroat, or thinking that if they put something free out to the world, they're giving away some secret, like they split the atom again. And like, I can't possibly give this away to the world.
Right.
It's crazy to think that that's how people's mindsets are still operating in this digital world where there's so much information out there. And the more that you put out there, and podcasting is a great platform to do it, the more valuable of a resource you become.
Yeah, agreed.
That's very, very true. Very true. I love the whole aspect of the podcast community and what it's done for us. We're very, very grateful for it. So a personal question for you, Jason.
Yes.
All right. What would most people be surprised to learn about you?
I don't know if they'd be surprised, but I love telling this story. I actually have a mafia connection way back in the family.
All right.
And it was the classic story of was with the mob and then flipped and got taken for a car ride and was never heard from again.
Aha.
My sister had the privilege of telling this story in her senior project in high school. And that was really where I learned about it, because she tapped into my grandfather, who was the most closely related to that and could tell that story. And it is one hell of a story.
Yeah.
So yeah, being the Italian guy that I am, that loves the Sopranos and Goodfellas and all the different mob movies and documentaries, it might not come as a surprise, but like I said, still fun to tell that story and see how people react.
That's it.
Yeah.
Not everybody with a great Italian last name can say they got a connection to it. Right?
That's very true. That's very true. And, we always say that the whole personal side of personal branding, that when we go speak, a lot of times we'll say, okay, well, what's the thing you remember most about us today? And very often it would be, oh, well, you were raised in the moonshine industry. My grandfather was a moonshiner, and that whole side of his family, they were moonshiners, and you sold vacuum cleaners when you were in college. Those are the things people remember about you. So imagine if all you did was sell yourself, and try to be too professional on something. They don't get to know the real you, right?
Yeah,
and the cool different things about you.
You have to be relatable in that respect, because no matter what you've accomplished or what you do, you're human. Like, I know that the first paragraph of my bio on my media kit that I send out to podcasters when I'm looking to join them to collaborate, I know I mentioned what I do, but I also put that I'm a connoisseur of steak and chicken wings. I love a good glass of bourbon and a cigar. I like to golf. I obsess over my fantasy football lineups at that time of year. Like, these are all things that, I don't just do podcast consulting and podcast coaching. I also have a life outside of this, and it makes me who I am. And a lot of people can relate to that. And you should never be afraid to tell your authentic story, because it's who you are. It's what's made you who you are today. And there's a lot to be drawn from that people can say, yep, that really hits home with me, because I went through something like that.
It's a great connectors.
We believe that to be the center connection to anything, that any entrepreneur that is forward facing in their business, that is the key to it right there. What you just said, it is, business is done, but business is done with relationally. It is done with people. And like you said, we all have these other things that make us up who we are, that are direct connectors. You know what I mean? Especially the steaks, the wings, the cigars, and the bourbon. Yeah, we are definitely connected there too.
I don't smoke cigars, but I'm in with all the rest. So
3 out of 4 ain't bad.
Yeah, I know exactly. Right. She doesn't mind being around it, so that's good. It helps me. So, okay, listen, Jason, we're going to ask you 5 important questions about your personal brand. Okay, and we do it sort of Jay Leno style. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, down to the one we think is the most important.
All right.
So here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, number 5. Who do you serve? So specifically, who are your ideal customers?
I work with professionals and entrepreneurs that are looking to make an impact with their brand, but looking for an innovative way to do it. And when I say innovative, I mean actually taking the time to learn a skill set that's going to not only serve them as a podcast guest, but serve them in other elements of their brand building initiatives. And in saying that, I'm not naive. I know there are some people that just don't want to learn that skill set. They're going to try to find shortcuts. That's why anybody I work with, it requires a consultation first, because we have to nip these things in the bud. So I would say ideally I look for entrepreneurs that are either established or getting their start, right? I mean, it could go either way, but ultimately it's someone that's thinking on a different level about how they can build and how they can get their voice out there.
Perfect. All right.
Love
Question number 4. Exactly how do you serve them?
I have a very hands-on approach. And again, if that's something that people can't get on board with, that's okay. I understand completely. I don't believe in fully automating a process when there needs to be human interaction to make it work. So yes, there are elements of my training program that are automated and you work on your own at your own pace, but I keep myself accessible. If you have questions, if you need to connect with me via Slack or email or telephone, you have all of my information and I'm ready to help. And throughout the training program, there are also aspects where we will work together to make sure that we're staying on track and you're learning the skill set that you need. So my best way to serve is to be hands-on and to be in the trenches, because I know I've purchased programs where once you sign that dotted line and you send your money, you never hear from that person again. And that sucks.
Mhm.
I want to be involved to make sure that they're getting what they paid for. And then that's going to make me better in the way that I present this to future customers and future clients.
Yes, couldn't agree with you more. And we're the exact same way. We automate a process, but we're 100% hands-on from start to finish. Yeah, because that's important. That's why they come to you. They want to hear from you.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that leads us to number 3. What qualifies you to serve them in that capacity?
Well, I would say I've had 7 years experience in the podcast space and I've learned all these elements, and that's important. But I think what qualifies me is that I'm human just like them. And I have goals to accomplish just like them. And I have a story just like them. And I think there's a lot of commonalities that come together that are going to allow us to build a good working relationship. Because you guys both know when you're working with somebody, it's not just about the work. You're talking about other elements in your life that make you happy, that serve you as a person. And if you can be, as you said earlier, Michael, forward facing enough to put that out there for someone to grab hold of, your relationship with that person is going to grow at a much more efficient pace, and it's going to allow the working relationship to take care of itself.
Mhm.
You get to know one another on a personal level, you relate to one another, and you both realize you're in it together to make the best levels of success come to life.
Yeah. In a very genuine way. Agreed.
Absolutely right.
All right. Question number 2. How does it make their life better?
I think transformation is the biggest thing everyone has to realize when they're looking at products, looking at services. I should say, if you're selling products and services and you have something out there, it's not just about that product or service. It's about how are they going to change once they take part? What's going to change in their life? How are you going to get them from point A to where they're not feeling very good about how things are going to point B to where everything's working? This was exactly what I needed. If you provided something in the middle that takes them from point A to point B and you can do it successfully, you've done your job. And you have to start thinking about people that they're looking for that transformation. They're not looking for your product or service. That's why I laugh every time I get someone on LinkedIn that sends me a random message out of nowhere saying they've got some integrated business, blah, blah, blah. I didn't get out of bed looking for that today. Why don't you ask me some questions first to see if I'm in the market for that type of thing? And that's where I dismiss those immediately. A lot of times I just unfollow people that do that right out of the gates.
Yes.
You have to be thinking on a level of how are you going to transform the people that you're working with and take them to the next level. And if you're thinking on that level, because that's how they're thinking, you're going to be much more successful.
We agree 1,000%. And then the number one question that we think is the most important about building a brand, what sets you apart from others in your industry?
I would say what sets me apart is you're not going to get any BS from me. And I do not believe in sugarcoating. I don't believe in saying that someone's giving great advice if I don't feel it's great advice. I don't believe in just trashing somebody, but I will gladly call somebody out and say, let's look at this a different way and talk about it. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to have those types of conversations. As I said, if you go and listen or go and look at my story on my About page, it's as real as it gets. And I went from when I first started my first business when I was 13 years old, right up to what I'm doing now. And to me, having that sense of reality when I'm working with a person immediately alleviates any type of veil, and it lifts the fog to where I know I'm dealing with a human being that is going to relate to me, and they're also going to shoot straight with me.
Right.
Because I would much rather learn that I've got something out there that's not serving somebody that I could be doing a little bit differently, because that's going to allow me to improve and grow myself.
Yes.
So if you can't be in that position to have a conversation, you don't have to agree with everything, but you have to be willing to have a conversation. Again, I mean, not to get political at all, but I feel like this is one of the main reasons we have so much divisiveness in our country right now, is because both sides can't get together and have a conversation and see the other person's viewpoint or the other side's viewpoint. That's absolutely a story that's going to go no further than me just saying that.
Yeah.
But
Very true.
that's where we're at now. And I feel like if you can't have that type of conversation, you're not going to get what you need from a relationship. And that's why I feel I stand out, because I'm willing to have that conversation from day one. Let's talk about what works. Let's talk about where you're struggling. Let's talk about some of the ideas you have that can help. And as a coach and a guide, that's my job. I'm not there to tell you every step of the way. In many cases, you already know. You just have to have a little guidance that helps you take that step in the right direction, or even some reassurance or validation that what you had in mind is the right way to go. Having those conversations that are real and they're rooted in value right from the start is what makes me stand out.
I love it. That is awesome.
Great job answering those questions, Jason. We had no doubt.
So on the,
I did not either.
And on the heels of that, how can prospects reach you if they have any questions or they want to work with you? What's the best contacts for you?
I welcome everybody that's listening to join me at jasonsircone.com/BeBoldBranding. I start everybody off with a free guesting blueprint. It's called 10 Tips for Being a Valuable, Fully Optimized Podcast Guest. And that really serves as the foundation for what to expect if you want to go down this road and bring podcast guesting into your content strategies. And then from there, we can talk about the next steps and see what works best for you.
Fantastic.
That sounds wonderful.
We encourage everybody to do that.
Absolutely, guys.
Podcast is the way of the future.
It sure is. It sure is. And I love the genuineness and the authenticity that you have, Jason, in what you do. So we appreciate what you do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming on Be Bold Branding.
Oh, I had a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. You bet. Okay, guys, if you're ready to take your brand to the next level, Michael and I want to help you. And so does Jason.
Yep.
Just start out by going, first of all, to jasonsircone.com/BeBoldBranding. Okay. Then go to discuss your brand, and you'll fill out a short form, and that's going to give you some more information, or give us some more information about you, so that we're better prepared for the call. And we'll get you started in the right path toward your branding journey. And, with the 1-2 punch here, we can make things happen for you. Okay. So we've got your back. Go to discussyourbrand.com.
Yep. And learn more about that. Hit subscribe. Be the first one to find out about it. Hit subscribe. Be the first one to find out about these things, folks, because we do want to help you with it. We do this for prosperity. And when we say prosperity, we're not just talking about money. That's just a part of it. We're talking about the full 360 of an abundant life we truly wish for every one of y'all. We know at BrandFace that prosperity favors the bold. So we say be bold, folks, especially with your brand, especially in 2022. And thank you, Mr. Jason, for joining us today. And thank you, Mr.
Thank you, guys. All right. We'll see you next time on Be Bold Branding.
Brought to you by BrandFace, the only comprehensive personal brand building system across the globe.